Welcome to episode 46, Construction Nation. This is Sue Dyer, your host of Construction Dream Team, where I interview industry leaders and experts so you can learn about the people side of construction and build your construction dream team based on OPE, other people's experiences. Why not learn from others who've already been there and done that? And so you don't have to suffer through. And I'm really excited about our guest today, Andrea Hoban, who is the co-founder and head of learning at OG Life Lab. And she, I believe, has the best stuff out there on how you can really use emotional intelligence to improve how you deal with your team. And so I'm so excited she's here. Let me just tell you a little bit about her. She possesses over 20 years of experience in leading large teams and building businesses. She has a broad background in training large teams and enterprises. I got a chance to meet Andrea and listen to her make a presentation at the Women Presidents Organization retreat we had in January. And I was blown away by her model because of how accessible it is to everyone to really understand emotional intelligence. And I think it has been mysterious to many who have tried to understand it and really not understood by those who have really tried to implement it. So I think we're going to learn a lot from her today. Her emotional intelligence approach is unique. And so I'm very excited to present her as a guest for everyone out there in Construction Nation. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you, Sue. It's really great to be here.
So I'm sure that one day you didn't just wake up and say, oh, I think I'll create the most unique model for emotional intelligence there is in the marketplace. What was your journey to really get to where you are today in OG?
Yeah, well, I was born in, no, I won't start that far back. I did spend, as you said, a fair amount of my working career really managing business teams and sales teams and learning a lot of the wrong lessons from leaders with certain skills or lack thereof, and kind of making my way and understanding what it takes to be a good leader from the School of Hard Knocks. I had a chance to then really take that to the next level and lead a large function around enterprise training skills and helping people build their job skills, which gave me entree into the leadership development world and into mentoring and coaching. And all of those skills, what I found is really the central issue of them all is how we experience our own emotions really colors the way that we see the world. And I've had the chance in the last few years to get to know a couple of really important people in this work. One is Dr. Mark Brackett, who runs the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence and has built quite a long research history around looking at the way emotions impact students and teachers in school systems. And there is this big calling to bring that work into the work world. And so in partnering with Mark Brackett and his writing partner, Robin Stern, who developed this model that I'll explain a little bit more about, works in schools. It also works for us in very busy, complex business situations. And it's a very accessible way to start realizing and seeing the way that emotions are coloring our experiences so that we might use them in a way that's really helpful to achieving the kind of outcomes we want for ourselves and for others.
That is so exciting. I think that emotional intelligence has so much opportunity to help us control what seems to be uncontrollable in so many instances. And on large, complex projects, it's really teams of teams. And there's so much people interaction that has to occur. And if one breakdown, it has a whole ripple effect. So it's so important. So can you give us a brief overview of emotional intelligence and maybe how it can help or hinder for those people who don't know what we're talking about?
Yeah. And I also wanted to finish my thought and say that basically Mark Brackett, Robin Stern, and I, along with a gentleman named Matt Kirsch, started this company called OG Life Lab, where we bring this work into this model to a professional audience. I didn't want to leave it out there that I'm just representing myself as a Yale professor, which I'm not. That said, the model in which I found in working with so many different managers and executives in all kinds of professions really boils down to a model that does this, that helps us recognize what we're feeling when we're feeling it. Turns out that many of us have lost contact with the fact that we have a wide and variety of complex emotions that we experience throughout the day. And the more we can come back into contact with what those are, that is really the first step to doing the rest of the skill building around understanding the root causes of what we're feeling. For example, and this is something I used very recently with an executive team, I challenged them, can you tell me the difference between disappointment and anger? Those emotions feel very similar, and you get a wide variety of answers from a group when you ask it. And it turns out, any ideas, Sue? I should pose it to you. Do you have any idea that the difference between the two emotions?
Well, they probably feel somewhat similar when I experience it. I think what my brain tells me would probably be what I would say is feels different.
Uh-huh. Yes. So
Sort of like excitement and stress.
yes,
Sort of
similar.
similar.
Yes.
But what my brain tells me is how I experience it differently.
Exactly. So anger at its root is really about a feeling of unfairness or injustice. And I don't know about you, Sue, but when I experience anger in my system, that's a very energized, unpleasant feeling. I can feel it in my stomach. I can feel my face getting hot. And the way I know how to come down from that feeling in a way that's helpful to my situation, or to be able to communicate something about my anger in a way that's appropriate for the context that I'm in, I've got good skills for that. I can take a deep breath. I can maybe walk away from an email in case that was my trigger, and do things that prevent me from saying or doing something I might regret. Disappointment at its root is about an unmet expectation. And so we can experience anger because we're disappointed. But where this becomes an interesting dissection of these two emotions is when I'm disappointed, my mental reaction to that is different than my anger. And so if I'm in a situation where I'm suddenly disappointed in my own performance, for example, I might need some different strategies of how to shift myself back into an emotional state that's suitable for what I'm trying to accomplish. So understanding root causes is really important as we start to build skill in this area, because I need to understand what I'm feeling so that I can modulate my response in a way that's helpful to the situation.
It seems to me too that if someone felt disappointment, and depending on why they felt the disappointment, like if I felt like I failed, or did I think someone else failed me, would be a very different reaction to it as well. Like
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I was recently talking with an executive at a truck manufacturing organization who, when I asked him, like, is there ever a reason that disappointment would be a useful emotion to feel? And his response was that yes, in fact, if he could actually recognize his feeling of disappointment for what it was, he'd be more likely to be able to communicate that in a way to the person that disappointed him. Maybe it's a teaching moment. So when we think about leading a team or managing a large project, if something hasn't happened the way it needed to happen, how do we emotionally respond to that? Do we get angry and stomp off? Because that's a secondary emotion to the disappointment we felt. And if I have a chance to make contact with that disappointment and say, listen, this is not acceptable. This is needed to be done in a certain way. How can we get this done together? That's a much different regulated response than to not know that that's what I'm experiencing and push someone away from me that might actually be useful if they understood my perspective as a leader.
Yeah, it seems like the depending on what's firing in your brain, of course, the disappointment could immediately lead you to the anger, and then we just stay on the surface instead of ever really understanding that we have misaligned expectations, or what I expected is not what occurred, and then we don't have a dialogue around it. So we never really understand each other. We just have a lot of hurt feelings.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So to recognize what we feel is the first step. Understanding what caused that feeling is the second. Once then we can start labeling what we feel with greater accuracy, like knowing the difference between disappointment and anger is really important for the next and last two steps of this, which is how do I express what I'm feeling in a way that's both authentic and contextually appropriate? Sometimes people laugh when I say that, like, is that possible to do both? I hope so, but not in all situations, I imagine. And if I'm in a place where I can't express what I'm really feeling, what will I do with that information? Because that too, if I hold it in for so long, is not helpful to my long-term mental or physical well-being. All of that's in service of being able to regulate our emotions for the purposes of achieving whatever objective lies in front of us. And that objective might be higher quality relationships, or better decision-making ability, or ability to take in more information and remember more. These are areas that have been studied for a long time. There's like over 350,000 research papers that have been written on the impacts of emotions in these different areas. And they include our ability to make decisions, how we learn new things, how we manage our relationships, our creativity and overall performance. And I keep coming back to decision-making because we do it all day long, especially as business leaders and project leaders. And sometimes emotions have these hidden ways of influencing the way we make decisions. And again, if we don't recognize what we're feeling, we could be compromising future business outcomes as a result.
Yeah. And what I see an awful lot is that we don't make a decision because we're pent up around fear or concern, or feel like we don't have enough information, or so that the decision doesn't get made in a timely manner. And
Yes.
then there's all kinds of ramifications to that as well.
Yes.
So give us a little bit of sense on working with teams, and particularly in the construction nation, we're a teams and teams of teams. How can they really use this EQ to improve relationships on their projects?
Yeah, I thank you for that question, Sue. It's one of the areas that's been studied is the concept that emotions are contagious. That what I feel, you might be able to catch. So part of this dynamic that's been studied, it turns out that the contagion is given off by the person who has the most power in that situation. And I'm sure you can reflect, Sue, personally, when you've been the recipient of an unwanted contagion. Either you're participating in a meeting, and the person who's in charge, in air quotes, walks in and they stomp in. They're clearly in a bad mood, and it completely changes the entire feeling of the room. You just feel the energy just start to just seep right out of the room.
Absolutely.
Or the opposite, when we're around really inspiring people who we may have felt pretty neutral, and all of a sudden they walk in and they get us excited about a new idea. They paint a vision of the future, and they say, take my hand, and you take it, and off we march into the future to make that thing happen. Emotions absolutely are contagious. And so what I find to be really helpful when working in teams is to think about, is what I'm feeling what I want people to catch from me?
That's a good question for all of us to ask, maybe several times each day.
Exactly. Exactly. Because if it's not, then I need to do something to shift myself into a better or more ideal emotional state for what I need to accomplish. sometimes, that is, it can be a tough meeting about revising project schedules that, no one is going to like, or change orders that are going to overwhelm people's work capacity. That kind of news requires the leader of that team to really think about, how do I want people to receive this information, and how can I show up in a way that's supportive of meeting our long-term objectives here. That's probably not showing up bitter or short-tempered or angry. If I want the best work from my team, I have to think about, how can I show up in a way that's open, that is, I can hear other people's concerns or ideas, that I can take more information in, and then I've got enough energy to carry the message and the vision forward.
I mentioned that you have a unique model for EQ. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Can you share some of how that is unique from what other people have done?
Yeah, absolutely. So, based on what I said earlier about all these steps of skills that are related to building emotional intelligence, what we really teach people is to focus on two big skills. How do I recognize what I'm feeling for the purposes of regulating them according to my goals? So we have this cadence around, how do I build skill recognizing for the purposes of regulating? Because when I'm regulated, then I can really give off the contagion that I want people to catch from me. So one of the main tools we use is something that was designed by Yale, and it's called the mood meter. And it's, if you can imagine, a simple 4x4 grid with an x-axis and a y-axis. The x-axis represents a scale of pleasantness of what we feel. And it's a -5 to a +5. So -5s are really unpleasant feelings like disgust or despair or rage. These are very unpleasant feelings. On the opposite side of the spectrum might be things like joy or feeling ecstatic or serene. Those are extremely pleasant. So you can start measuring the pleasantness of a feeling, because we always have a sense of that. The y-axis represents the energy of something that we're experiencing. So is it really low energy? Am I depleted? Am I sleepy? Or is what I'm feeling really have a lot of activation to it? Am I anxious? Do I feel fearful? Am I irritated, angry, or, like I said, enraged? On the pleasant side, that might turn into feeling motivated or cheerful or ecstatic. And when I'm feeling things that are pleasant but low energy, that might feel more mellow or grateful or rested. So all of those, we can generally place ourselves on what we're feeling by thinking about its pleasantness and how much energy it has in my system. And
so that's the first step then, is to really understand, be more aware of what you're actually feeling. So that's the first step on
That's
this?
the first step, yes. And once you understand that, you can start visualizing, where do I want, if this is not an ideal place for me to be emotionally, where could I be? What would be the more ideal emotional state? Because once I can visualize that, then I can start using some strategies to move myself there. So this cadence around recognizing is to understand what I'm feeling from a pleasantness and energy standpoint. And then I start looking at, where do I want to be emotionally, and looking for ways to shift there. And so a large part of what we ask people to do is to build a toolkit of strategies for themselves. And they could be as simple as, I say simple, again, I might use air quotes, Sue, because we have some hard mental patterns around how our emotions cause certain thinking cycles in the way that we see things or the way we see ourselves. So coming back to disappointment, if I'm disappointed in myself, man, that gets me really ruminating. And, I start kicking myself in the shins for how I could have done this better, or why it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. So in that case, a thinking strategy like positive self-talk, to say, you know what, Andrea, maybe it didn't work out this time, but you've got this next time. You know how to do this. You're really good at it. So why don't you let that go and just focus on the future? So thinking strategies are a way to shift that loop of negative thinking that might keep us in an emotional state that's, again, not helpful to us. Other strategies might be action strategies, like how can I shift either something about my environment or my body that in a way helps me start to shift to a more pleasant or a different energy state that's helpful to me. So yes, really, again, coming back to how do I recognize what I feel allows me to start thinking about the ways I might regulate to an emotional state that's more helpful to me, either in the short term or the long term.
How do people come up with a toolbox of strategies?
So I would recommend thinking around what kind of strategies do I already know work for me? I mean, we're not empty vessels, Sue. We've got into adulthood and we have a good sense of the things, if we paid attention to it, that make us feel good. You know, there's certain songs or music that we can listen to that lift us up. We know that going for a walk or working out or eating a good, healthy meal, these are things that help us feel really good. We also know that there's things that we do that don't make us feel good. There's plenty of that too. So when we start tuning into what actually we already do that supports a shift when we need to, then we build from there. So maybe we know, and this is my general experience, people will generally have more tools in one area. They'll be very good thinkers in that they can either talk, positive self-talk them out of their mental state, or they can see the situation differently through using a reframing technique, or they choose to look at the situation through different perspectives. And that will help them break the cycle of what they're feeling so that they can then choose to feel something differently. Yeah. Were you going to say something?
Well, my question would be, this is really powerful. Two things come to mind. One is that people will be less reactionary over
Mm-hmm.
time. Maybe not at first, but over time, because once you're kind of understand what you feel and you have some strategies for not going there to where it's uncomfortable for you, you will be less reactionary. And secondly, what happens when an entire team is practicing this? It seems like it could be kind of magical.
Yeah, it really is kind of magical. Again, in a very practical way, Sue. I come back to this team of automotive executives. So again, not necessarily a California woo woo kind of audience, right? They're making trucks, and so they are using this mood meter tool in meetings where they'll ask each other, how are you feeling right now? Not so that they can have a counseling session, but so, when somebody comes to that meeting and says, you know what, I'm really angry right now and anxious all at the same time because I've got 3 customers that are not satisfied with their order and I need to fix it today. And so the leader in the meeting can say, you know what, we understand. Let's give you the information you need so you can get back to it and and fix the problem. So it's about being able to respond to people in a way that gets business moving forward, that gets work moving through the system in a way that's a lot less, it's more frictionless. I guess I want to say that people feel seen, heard, and supported in a way that helps them get their work done. And what I also see that's part of the magic of this is it's not a work only skill set. That once you start practicing this, because you see the performance levels of a team can increase when you show up as a regulated leader who's calm and a good listener in otherwise tense circumstances. People want to follow that kind of leader. But these skills follow you home, where now you might want to show up as a parent who also is a good listener, who cares deeply, and who doesn't react to the teenager who pops off with something they don't even know why that they said. Not that I'm speaking from experience.
That never happens. No.
So yeah, it does become kind of magical where people can express themselves in a way that's helpful to a situation and have tools in their back pocket of when emotions get very big or overwhelming, of how they can tune the dial in a way that helps them come back to a place where they can really meet their goals.
One of the things that has always been intriguing to me about EQ as opposed to IQ. Because in IQ, everybody feels like, at least the belief used to be, I don't think anybody believes it anymore, is that that's your IQ, that's it for life. I mean, everybody knows now your IQ continues to get bigger as you learn more. But in EQ, it's always been believed that you could improve your EQ
Yes.
and that you can grow. And these are things that can be learned, and you can have techniques and strategies. And yours just seem more practical and pragmatic
Yes.
than some of the ones I've seen many over the course of the last 30 years. So I really like that.
I
Um,
Googled emotional intelligence the other day and it came up with over 200 million returns.
I
I mean,
believe
there's a
it.
lot of stuff out there. And so it's really hard to make sense of what is it really. And so to have this definition where we can say, yes, it's a skill set. And because it's a skill set, it can be improved over time is a very empowering thing to hear, that it's not something I'm born with. It's something I can work at. And when I do, I can absolutely see improved circumstances through all elements of my life.
Yeah. So what would people do in Construction Nation if they were interested in learning more about EQ? What's your best advice?
Well, to learn more about it, in terms of resources, is that what you're asking, Sue? Or
Resources or training or, an assessment. I know there's lots of them out there.
yeah, there are. One Mark Brackett, our co-founder, just recently published a book called Permission to Feel. It's you can easily purchase it on Amazon, and I love the way that it's written. I think it's very accessible again to people who haven't spent years studying psychology or the psychology of emotions. And I would say that's a great resource if you want to learn more. Another one is the program that I put together and with their help is this thing we call an Emotion Life Lab, where it's a app you download to your phone, but it's very interactive and requires lots of reflection to determine its relevancy in your own life, and also includes live sessions via Zoom so that you get to really frame your understanding with other people and with a talented facilitator and coach who can help you consolidate your learning and take it into action. So it's one thing to learn and read more. It's another thing to start putting it into action. And I find that kind of spaced repetition of learning a little bit over a long period of time is really the magic around saying that you have more skill and seeing it in action in the world.
Well, one of the questions I have too, just shifting a little bit, is more about you. Tell us a little bit more about you, Andrea. How did you come to be a part of and looking at teaching EQ and being involved in this? There must be a story behind that.
I when I was when I worked for a large corporation where I managed that job skills training function, and it was my job to come up with the training strategy and deployment execution for training for 10,000 employees across many countries, 17, I think, in retrospect. And I started becoming so interested in not only the reason my emotions swang from so high to so low, but why my teams did as well, why things felt so stressful and overwhelming. And it led me down this journey really around coaching and mentoring people. Uh, and part of when you start learning how to be a coach, you have to unpack your own baggage. So it was really a personal journey of understanding myself more deeply and using tools like this to help people understand themselves more deeply so they could really live the lives they wanted to live. And so that was my primary interest, was how do I help people build skills that really make a large difference in the quality of their lives? And doing it in this kind of format that I have available to me now allows me to offer it to so many more people than I could ever fly to meet or get in a room together, that it becomes much more scalable and yet so personal. It's, you don't lose that personal touch where you have a chance to have personal breakthroughs at your own pace and in your own time.
That's so exciting. So I'm sure that over the course of your career and your life, you've gotten a lot of advice. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Wow. That's an intense question, Sue. I think probably the best advice I've ever had was that emotions matter, and that simply put, they're information. And when I start looking at emotions as being information, that allows me to start exploring them with curiosity, and I'm less likely to judge myself or judge the emotions that other people feel. And it turns out that curiosity, that experience of curiosity, is something that actually helps us become more down regulated itself. Like it's really a helpful emotion to initiate the parasympathetic nervous system, to calm our systems down, and we can start to really explore the possibilities around our emotions and better actions in our life, because we can have access to what we feel. Mark likes to say when we become emotion scientists and not emotion judges, we're really expressing a growth mindset. And when we have a growth mindset, we really create the possibility of changing. I think it's so simple. It was really profound to me to say emotions are information. And as such, I have permission to explore all what that means and what I can do with it.
Yeah, I love that because it is that inner judge that kind of messes everything up. So you got to silence it. And I like the idea of scientific inquiry here. You're
Yes,
trying to see what it's like and exploring it. Then there's no fear behind exploration either, whether it's your own or between you and another person.
that's
You can
right.
explore it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we ask everyone here to give us a gift. All of our, what kind of gift would you have for us? I know you've already shared a couple with us. A resource. This could be a book or anything that you would want to share that we could, as Construction Nation, take and learn more about EQ. And I already grabbed the book that you mentioned about permission to feel. And I know you have an app, so maybe you can talk about that a little bit. But do you have anything else you would want to share with us?
The part of Mark Brackett's work is this mood meter tool, which is a part of the OG Emotion Life Lab for someone who wanted to explore more how to build skill over time with emotional intelligence. But for those that are interested in starting to look at their emotions on that X and Y axis, there is an app you can download from the App Store called the Mood Meter. And so that would be something else that people might be interested in terms of exploring how they're feeling for the purposes of really shifting when it's better to do so.
That sounds wonderful. I can see a bunch of teams all over the country and other parts of the world checking out their moods before they start their weekly meetings. I think they might have better results with their meetings. So, how can Construction Nation get a hold of you?
Well, you can reach me at my email address, which is andreah@oglifelab.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two best places to find me, where I'm pretty active. And of course, I check my email all the time. I would also invite you, asked about a gift. I would say if the first of your listeners were to email me and say that they wanted to try the Emotion Life Lab, I would be willing to give the first person who responds to that request via email to enroll them for free, which is normally a $349 program because it's not simply an app. So
Well, there you go. Come on, everybody, get up right now and send an email to Andrea H at OG Life Lab, OJI. It's like
mhm,
Ojai here in California, OGLifeLab.com. And
yes,
be the first.
and
And
you
then
get it
tell us what happened
exactly.
because we want to know. So, what parting advice do you have for us, Andrea, that where we could really do something starting today to maybe improve our emotional intelligence wherever we are and whomever we're working with?
Much along this lines of being an emotion scientist and not an emotion judge, I would say the best thing we can do to get started is to name it to tame it. Can we write down what we're feeling several times a day? And sometimes people will tag this activity to something they already do, like every time they fill their water bottle or every time they go to a meeting. That makes it easier to remember to do. But the more I start really checking in and recognizing what I'm feeling, like I said before, this is a gateway to regulation. And so building that awareness around the emotions I experience throughout the day is really helpful to me, to my relationships, again, to my decision-making capacity, and to my emotional and mental well-being.
That's so exciting. And I'm going to be doing that, and I'll let you know how it goes.
I would love to hear it,
I will
Sue.
be checking in, making sure. What am I feeling now? I'll be checking in with my staff too. What are you guys feeling? They go, "What's wrong with her?" So it's I think it's so important to understand that if we don't understand our feelings, they're going to play out anyway. And why
Yep,
not? Why not be the master of them? Huh?
that's right. One of the executives I work with, he talks about like he used to put all his emotions in a box until all of his boxes exploded open about 15 years ago, about the same time. And I think it's more useful to think about them as leaky buckets, that to ignore our emotions, we do so at our own peril. Because if they're information, even big, overwhelming emotions have a message for us. And so if we can start tuning into what that message may be, we can do something about that.
Yeah. And I think all of us grew up in ways where certain emotions are not okay.
Mm-hmm.
It varies by family, varies by company, but certain emotions are not okay. And just because you have an emotion doesn't mean you act on it. But that's the whole idea of emotional intelligence is that you don't act on it. You act on it in a way that's helpful for you and for others.
That's right.
Yeah. So I want to thank you so, so very much for being a guest on Construction Dream Team. I know that this is going to be very helpful to many, many projects all over the country and other parts of the world who are maybe struggling today as they listen to this in getting along or resolving an issue or getting a decision or just they're stressed out and
Mm-hmm.
they need some relief. So I know this is going to be very helpful. So I so thank you for being with us.
It's been a real pleasure, Sue. As you can tell, I could talk for hours on this subject, but I'm glad to be helpful, especially to this industry where the pressure is real, the deadlines are non-negotiable, and the stress is really high. And if this kind of work helps people manage that in a way that's helpful to them personally and helps them achieve their project goals, then I'm all for it. So it's really a pleasure to be here and talk to you today.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, so Construction Nation, send this episode out to your team members. They need to listen to this so they're beginning to think about their own emotions. Even if they just take one of these ideas, think about the difference you're going to have over the course of this month and the course of this project that you're currently working on. Send it out to everyone, share it, talk about it. Remember, dream teams don't just happen. They are built one step at a time, and EQ could be a very important part of your building block to your construction dream team. Also, remember that we drop every single Monday morning at 4 a.m. Pacific time. So please join me next week when I will interview another industry leader or expert about the people side of construction so that you can learn how to create your construction dream team. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We are here for you, and I will catch you next time.